Last Monday in the month of April. We know where April's gone. We've all been sitting here watching it go by. So this is the 27th day of April. The NFL draft is now in the books. And we move on to the next phase in sports, which will be to see exactly when one of these leagues makes a pronunciation of sorts as to what its plans will be. And this is a tricky time. We'll do some stuff on the draft and on the fan later on. We'll take some calls on it. We'll have Brian Balding on it in a couple of minutes on radio.com. It's a funny time right now because if you're sitting here and you're the NBA, you're the NHL, you're Major League Baseball, you're trying to get some answers. You have no answers. You can't get definitive answers from any government agency. You can't get anything out of any municipality. What about what's going to happen in your city? What's going to happen in your state? What's going to happen in this part of the country? What's going to happen at these airports? What's going to happen here? What's going to be the law of the land? So until that stuff starts to clarify, and maybe it will little by little, we'll see. But until that starts to clarify, how does sports get behind anything? We all hear the same plans. We know that we have a golf tournament in Fort Worth with no fans coming up on the 8th of June. Just as an example, I heard the last couple of days some rumblings that they will race horses this summer at Saratoga. The sales are already off. They look like they're going to try and race horses. We don't know if there'll be anybody in the stands. We don't know that yet. Remember, the races are very lucrative in Saratoga anyway because as a simulcast around the country, the product is an extremely valuable one. A lot of money is wagered each day on the Saratoga meet. And if you didn't have Belmont, you could even open Saratoga. If it was just going to be as a TV studio, you could open it up at 4th of July and run it for 2 months. What's the difference? You're not going to have fans there anyway. And we don't know whether fans are going to be in the buildings or not, just like we don't know if there's going to be fans at a baseball game this year. So we wait to hear what the NBA is going to do. The NBA has talked about needing 25 days to get ready to play. We don't know what the NHL is going to do. They did drop that whole thing about playing up in the Dakotas. That's all off with. We know that's gone by the boards. And we're not sure yet what baseball is going to do. But one thing that you've seen, and you've seen some of the baseball writers opine on it, and they've been right. It's almost like they've wanted to warn both sides for past actions. Because clearly, now all owners are interested in revenue. Don't try to differentiate any owner from any other owner. In every sport, owners are interested in revenues. They want to win, they're interested in revenues. But in no sport have they been more greedy, although I'd say it's a pretty good fight in baseball and football for the owners. On the baseball side, on the player side, it's all baseball. And already you've heard rumblings that there could be a problem in baseball when it comes to how they would get paid. Now, as you probably know, baseball came to an agreement with the players for April and May. They gave them $170 million, which I think works out to just a little under $5,000 a day for veteran players. Now, baseball players believe that if baseball starts back up, they get paid in full. The owners have started to hint that, whoa, that would be if we played the season. That would be if we had people in the stands. If we don't have people in the stands, we cannot honor that contract. And they're like, oh, yes, you can. You already agreed to it. So they're already almost at loggerheads. There's already a confrontation brewing between the Player Association and the owners in baseball as to what happens if they do come back and they don't have fans in the stands because the players expect to get paid. That could cost some franchises $300,000 every 2 weeks in losses if they had to honor those kind of deals. Because when you look at it, the TV money in baseball is not what it is in the NFL. In baseball, the gate receipts are the biggest revenue producing number. The baseball receipts are a little over $3 billion, and then kick in another $1 billion for the secondary and tertiary revenue streams, like like beer and parking and etc. So you got almost $4 billion in gate receipts. In the NFL, the biggest is the revenue comes from the network TV. Remember, in baseball, the network money is divided, but the other money is extremely inadequate. It's extremely unequal, in that some teams, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, they get a lot of revenue, and some other teams don't get much revenue at all. So you got a great disparity there in revenue. So if you have a big payroll and you don't have any fans in the stands and you're not seeing any big bucks, all of a sudden, why am I opening? I'm not going to open money to lose money every day. And that could definitely be the case. I've heard that as we've talked about cities opening and places opening and different businesses opening. I've heard people talking about New York. Well, we can have these socially. First of all, I don't know how anybody's going to socially distance New York and open it up. I mean, it's comical. But here's a perfect example. You can have these restaurants where you just take out half the seats. Anybody who knows anything about good or big-time Manhattan restaurants knows that those restaurants, if they're not doing 90% of their available seating and on Friday and Saturday night turning it over 2 or 3 times, they're not making a dime. So the idea that they could go in and have 50% of the place for spacing is utterly ridiculous. They might as well not even open the doors. They can't make any money that way. Their margins are so tight that they need to have the whole place completely sold out for every available seat. They squeeze every seat in there and they flip them over a couple of times on the weekends. I mean, otherwise, people who talk about this stuff don't even know what they're talking about. It's the same thing you're hearing people talk about New York City. Hey, how are you going to open New York City and socially distance? Explain to me how you're moving the people from the suburbs into the city every day. How are they getting there? One person to an LIR car? 2 people to a subway car? Metro North Path train, come on, it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. And then how they get up the elevators in the office buildings, one at a time? I don't know you, but have you ever seen any busy office building in Manhattan? Okay, a lot of elevators, a lot of them full, minute after minute, right around 9 o'clock in the morning, 8:30 in the morning. One at a time in the elevator? I guess a lot of people are going to use the stairs in procession style. One every 15 seconds. So the idea that they can do this is crazy. The same thing you run into, that sports runs into. Every time you try to think of a way to open something up, there's a reason to be discouraged. There's something that doesn't fit. That's the same thing that happens in baseball. Every time baseball goes to come up with a plan, there's something that doesn't fit. It could be how are they going to get paid, which is logical and has to be dealt with quickly. And they have to read that one right. And the people who have opined on that are exactly right. Hey, in a country going through a crisis for the ages, and that's what this has become, in a country where you have whole cities shut down like Las Vegas, where you have, 25 and 30 and 35 million people unemployed. You think any of them care about whether the baseball players get all their money? Or they care about whether or not the owners have to pay on their $137 million payroll without any gate receipts? All they're going to hear is a pox on both their houses, and rightly so. So baseball's got to get absolutely on the right page and realize they can't take that public fight. They can't take that fight public this year, not under any circumstances. And they both want their money. You've already heard, we're playing. If we're playing, we're getting paid. You've heard that from the player side, and you've also heard from the owner side. I'll be damned if I'm going to open up and lose money every 2 days. So they have a lot of issues. Then you have where they're going to play. Now, the date that's being bandied about, just for those of you who are interested in such things, is July 1st. And there's also this idea of this 3-city thing where there are enough stadiums within the proximity of Dallas, Phoenix, and Tampa to use those as the hubs of which the other stadiums would rotate. That's one plan. There are a couple of exotic plans that turn it into a kind of double elimination, kind of 2-month, 60-day playoff bracket where you play some games in the regular season. That's just to stagger you for really to get you in conditioning, and then to put up some stats, collect some money, and also stagger the teams so that this is how they stagger them for this double elimination tournament that would go on for 60 days. I'll tell you right now, it does away with the history of regular season. It'll be hard to sell it to a purist as a regular season. The regular season stats wouldn't play into this season. But if you wanted to just a heightened drama that would really captivate the country, that event would do it. If you take any of these sports, if you take hockey, if you take basketball, if you take baseball, and you turn this into a month-long or 6-week-long, or in baseball's case, 2-month-long playoff competition without a net, it will be unbelievably received by the fans. That will be drama of the highest order. And it can be done. And maybe that's the way to salvage this season, with something out of the box like that. The draft came off, and let's be fair, I've been at times very critical of the NFL. More so in recent years. Under the Goodell regime, I've been more critical of it than I was during the Roselle or Tagliabue years. Very few times I was at odds with the Roselle years, because I thought Roselle was the best commissioner ever, quickly followed by Stern. Silver's the smartest commissioner now, and also the one who's the best leader. But the NFL did a very good job. Give their technical people a great deal of credit. The IT people, the computer people, the TV people did a great job putting on this event. They even made Rodgers somewhat likable, which is hard to do. And it came off without a blip. I mean, all right, they overdid a couple of things. Fine. Nothing's perfect. But for the most part, they presented the show in a very, very good fashion. They really did. Give them credit. Under the most trying of circumstances, with a lot of things that they'd never done before, and having to move, from site to site to site to site, get reactions, go into people's homes, and do all that in the way they had to do it, in a lot of very, very quick, juxtapositions of people, place, and time. I give them credit. They did a very good job. Very, very few mistakes. The NFL should be commended for what they pulled off. They pulled something off, and it was needed right now. The ratings were very good, as you would expect, but more than anything else, they pulled it off. As far as the Giants and the Jets, to me, both teams are in a position where it's impossible for them to not get players that can help them. They could bring a guy off the street and he would get them players that would help them. So that's not the issue here. The issue is, did they get the right players? And for that, we have to wait to see what happens. If either one of those tackles aren't starting that they each took in the first round, that's a big mistake. If their second-round guys aren't contributing right from Jump Street on both these teams, that's a big mistake. After that, you start to leverage it a little bit, and you see how many guys you have. Now, again, if you made it, there are guys who can keep their whole roster. A prerequisite, the first thing that people look at is, how many of your picks make the roster? There are GMs with the power to keep their whole group on the roster. If that's the only prerequisite, well, that's fine. What you need to see is that with your eyes, that those guys that they have are there for a reason, not just to keep them. I remember a time where there was a guy who was I'm not going to say what player it was, but there was a first-round bust. And the coach wanted to get rid of him. He was like, this guy just can't play dead. And the GM said, you can't do that to me. I can't get rid of a first-year guy I took in the top 11 picks. I think it was number 11. He kept him in the first year. He kept him the second year. Never played. And then the third year, I think he came up with a mysterious injury. But you can keep the guy on the roster. The general manager has the power to do that. That's not always the prerequisite. What you want to see is that the guy plays, that the guy contributes right from the start. You expect, well, the Jets and the Giants are weak enough here. You expect the guys they take with the premium rounds, the first, second, and third, to contribute immediately to these teams. And for the most part now, teams go into it and they say, I have this much money to spend in free agency, and I have my first, second, and third round picks, my premium picks, and I have to come away and fill this hole, this hole, this hole, this hole. So everyone will tell you best athlete and all that stuff. There is much now drafting for need as they are anything else. The Jets and Giants both needed offensive linemen. That's what they went and got. They didn't get the best athlete. They went out and got the best lineman they could get. They both needed help in certain areas. Giants needed help on defense in a lot of areas. They went out and got a guy who was the best defensive player they could get, which makes sense because they had so many holes. The Jets went out in the second round, needed a wide receiver, went out and got one. So they went out and filled holes. They had a shopping list to go out and fill holes. That's what it's about. And then you try to explain the crazy moves, like when the Packers take a quarterback. And that opens up and sends the whole league into flames. Sunday morning, how many, really not even Sunday morning, go right after the first round, how many reports were they, Aaron Rodgers is going here, Aaron Rodgers is going to the Bears, Aaron Rodgers is doing this, Aaron Rodgers is doing that. Hey, things have a habit of quieting down. Did that make Aaron Rodgers happy? I'm sure it didn't. But remember, the coach, the general manager, they expect to be here a lot longer than Aaron Rodgers. Did they send a little message to Aaron Rodgers? They definitely did. They definitely did. You can say they didn't, but they did. They didn't get him something that's going to help him right off the bat. They went out and got him a quarterback. That doesn't help him at all. That's not something he can use personally. It's a little different with what the Eagles did. Didn't trade up to get him, didn't go get him on the first round, and got a guy that you actually could create a little bit of a mold for. Plus, he's not going into a team with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, in Philly, the quarterback has promise, but he's not a first ballot, walk-in, stone-cold Hall of Famer like Aaron Rodgers is, who thinks he has plenty of time left. See, now all quarterbacks think they have a lot of time left, but Rodgers got at least a couple of years. The question is, what can the Packers get out of those years with him, and when does that time period end? When is it accelerated? In this day and age, when you take a quarterback on the first round, the clock's ticking. That's just the way it is. It's a different world now. We'll do some draft when we return. We'll welcome in Brian Baldinger, do a little draft. Brian, welcome. How are you?
Mike, I'm doing great. It's good to be with you, buddy.
All right, let me start with the couple of controversies. The Packers first. How surprised were you by the quarterback pick?
I was pretty shocked. I knew his coach, Jordan Love's coach at Utah State, Matt Wells. He's at Texas Tech now, Mike. And he thought he'd get drafted in the first or second round, go to a place where he could sit, and really learn for a year. But, that's not the situation in Green Bay. They went to the NFC Championship game. They need more firepower. This was the draft to get it, and they didn't get it. And so I don't know if the clock is ticking on Aaron Rodgers right now, but I was shocked that they went in that mode. And that's not to knock Jordan Love. He's got a lightning arm now. I mean, he can throw it anywhere. But I thought it was a bizarre pick.
You got a quarterback who's coming off a team that thinks it's got a lot closer last year, who thinks he's got 3 years left, about 3-4 years left to win another Super Bowl, who's already a Hall of Famer, who broke in a new coach last year, as how he looks at it, broke in a new regime last year, without a lot of issues, at least on the surface. And then they go out, and instead of getting him a weapon, they go out and get him a quarterback and trade up to get him.
Mike, he had one receiver on that unit last year, Devontae Adams, that he really trusted. Third downs, go for it on fourth down. You need a play at the end of the game, like in Seattle playoff game. Let's finish this game out. Ball's going to Devontae Adams. And everybody knew it. And they would be just so much better if they could find a complement to that. But, they drafted a running back, a big 250-pound running back from Boston College in the second round. It looks like they're changing the whole philosophy of how they want to play football right now. They went to a lot of 2 and 3 tight end looks last year and ran the ball. But, in this league, you better be able to throw it. When you're second and long, third and long, you better be able to put some guys that can beat one-on-one coverage and win. And when you have a guy that could play this game in a tuxedo the way Aaron Rodgers can, it just help them out. And I feel like some organizations understand that, and I think Green Bay has been really deficient about it.
That's a strange marriage now, and one that, people already have over, which is, again, jumping the gun. Okay, they, people have them already heading to other teams, which is ridiculous. But the point is, it is a very odd message to send. And, the word came out, he didn't know about it. Well, of course he didn't know about that. If he had known about that, he would have thrown a fit before the draft. We know that going in. It bears watching what the future holds for that. We'll have to wait and see. Eagles got a lot of attention. That one doesn't bother me that much, though, because to me, you got a coach there who likes to think outside the box, and he brings in a player who's a good kid who you can use like a Swiss Army knife, who can do a lot of different things. I can buy that one. That one doesn't bother me that much.
53rd pick right there with a guy like J.K. Dobbins on the board. There's some good football players right there, Mike. I could have seen Dobbins and Miles Sanders.
I love Dobbins, first of all. I thought he was a first rounder myself, so I agree with you on the running back. But at least I know the coach has got a little plan. He might want to use him, in some short yardage stuff. He might want to use him in some different ways. He might also like him as a quarterback. That one, at least, it's not a first-round pick. You're not Aaron Rodgers. You don't have the cachet Aaron Rodgers has. You don't, and it is a second-round pick. It's not trading up in the first round. It's not as egregious. Now, you can make a case it's not the right thing if you're a young quarterback, but it's not as bad as what the Packers did.
It's not, Mike. And look, I was on record saying I want Jalen Hurts on my team. I want his professionalism. I want his competitiveness. I want that guy out there in practice every day competing. But I'm not sure that the 53rd pick, with all the needs that the Eagles had, that it was the right pick. However, if Carson Wentz plays the best football of his career because he feels like there's a fire lit there or whatever, and it makes, iron sharpens iron, that kind of thing. If it gets the best out of Carson, then it's the right pick. And I do believe, look, the Eagles have played 6 postseason games in the last 3 years, including the Super Bowl, Mike. And Carson Wentz has played a grand total of 9 snaps in those 6 postseason games. So at some point you go, maybe this is going to be the history, and we want to be a playoff team every year. Let's get ourselves a guy that looks like, I think he's going to be an NFL quarterback, whether it's with the Eagles or not. All I saw the guy did was grow in Oklahoma and compete and get better. And he's an elite athlete on top of it. Like I said, I want that guy on my football team.
All right, we're talking with Brian Balding. Giants and Jets. Giants, first of all, the four offensive tackles all went in the top 13 picks. Everyone likes someone differently. Some people had Wirfs first. Some people had him fourth. Some people had every one of them third and fourth. Everyone had him in a different order. Did you have any reason to like one over the other?
Well, I liked the Jets pick, Mekhi Becton, because I thought he had the best upside, Mike. He just turned 21, his size, his movement. I thought he could become a real dominant player. But I didn't really, I had them pretty close together, like you said. Everybody had them differently, no matter who you talk to. The one thing I think they liked about Andrew Thomas was he came in as an 18-year-old freshman, started right away at right tackle, all 15 games at right tackle. They went to the national championship game. Obviously they get beat by Alabama, and then Isaiah Wynn gets drafted by the Patriots, and he goes over and starts the next 2 years at left tackle. So, there may be a situation where he starts at right tackle this year, and Nate Solder isn't there after this year. Who knows? Maybe he goes over and plays left tackle. I think the fact that they saw him play both at a high level, I think that was the determining factor in them taking Andrew Thomas. The fact that he started 41 straight games for him, never missed a game with an injury, did miss the bowl game, sat that out. But other than that, he was healthy with a big NFL body on him.
So if you were picking fourth, your pick would have been Becton?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would have taken Becton. I think Joe Douglas was happy, very happy that the Giants took Andrew Thomas, and it felt like it did because that's the guy that they wanted, and it's the guy that they got.
What do you think about the second round? What do you think? Listen, you're as bad as the Giants and Jets. You expect all those guys, second, third rounders, to contribute. What do you think about how they filled out the next couple of rounds? Safety, wide receiver, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I like Xavier McKinney. 2-year starter there, started 28 straight games, forced fumbles. You pair him with Jabril Peppers back there. All of a sudden, the Giants don't look like they're just going to give up these big plays like they've been given. Looks like they got two guys that can run, that can tackle, that can hit, that can knock the ball loose. Guy had 5 forced fumbles now. It'd be nice if the Giants actually knocked the ball loose for a change and, got a few extra bats for the offense. They haven't been doing that for a long time. I like Xavier McKinney. He can cover, Mike. I thought he was the number one safety in football. I think they felt pretty fortunate. It was a pretty easy pick at number 36 to go get McKinney.
What about Mims?
Well, Denzel Mims, look, the Jets sitting there at 48, Mike. Joe Douglas trades back to 59, drops 11 spots, gets a third-round pick, and he still gets Denzel Mims. Now, you're kind of holding your breath. You got a couple guys out there that you might take, but Mims was still there. He was there at 48. He was there at 59. One thing I know about Matt Rule players, and Matt coached them for the 3 years at Baylor, is they're going to be tough. They got through the hardest practices they're ever going to get to. They got to be mentally tough. They got to be able to block. He's not fully polished yet. He's got to work on some releases and run a few different routes a little bit better. But I think he is a really great prospect with tremendous talent to work on.
What did you expect the quarterbacks to go where they did, or is that the way you expected them to go off the board at 5 and 6?
Well, you knew they were going to go high, Mike. It was just a question of, what was Miami going to do? Were they going to roll the dice with Tua, with the injuries and the history of injuries, or were they going to ignore it and just take the talent? And I think they did the right thing. Think about it. They gave up all these players, traded away all this capital so that they could be in a position to get themselves a franchise quarterback. If they didn't come away with Tua, I don't think that you would have been happy if you got Justin Herbert. I thought there was a big drop-off between the two. Now, the Chargers, took him, which is fine. They're in a situation with Tyrod Taylor there. They might not have to play him right away. They need a replacement for Phillip Rivers. I didn't have a problem with the Chargers taking him. I thought that would have been kind of backwards thinking if you trade away all this Laramie Tunsil and all the guys they traded away to go get Justin Herbert.
How good is, we're talking with Brian Baldinger, how good is Tampa Bay right now when you add in Wirfs, add in Gronkowski, what they had there last year with the tremendous firepower they had? Last year their quarterback got 33 touchdown passes. He did have 30 interceptions, but he also threw for 5,000 yards. You got Brady now. They got the tackle they wanted. They got Gronkowski to come in. Now, team gave up a ton of points last year. Also gave up 112 points just on Winston's turnovers last year. How good. I mean, do you think they're a 9-win team? You think they're better than that just by Brady's arrival and obviously everything else that's going on?
Well, I think they're better than 9 wins, Mike. They were 7-9 last year. They played Atlanta the final game of the season. It went to overtime. On the first play of overtime, Jameis Winston throws a pick six. Season was over. They ended up 7-9. It could have been 8-8. That was the story of the season. The last 6 weeks, you have to really look at that defense and look at what Devin White. You look at Vita Vea. You look at all the firepower they had on defense, whether it was Jason Pierre-Paul or Shaquille Barrett, who led the league in sacks. The defensive secondary was all rookies. They all got better. Their secondary is going to be better. I think the defense is going to be a top 10 defense. We know Todd Bowles can coach defense. I think Brady, just by mere of taking care of the football, Mike, they've got 3 more wins with a chance to compete for more. You can see that Brady already is a different guy. I mean, he's already doing talk shows, and he's being seen out in public, and he actually shows his personality now. He got Gronk to come back as the first call he made way before he even signed with Tampa. And you could go talk to Bruce Arians 10 minutes before kickoff. You get a good joke from him. It's just going to be a different atmosphere, but he'll bring the Patriot way to a degree with them. But I think he's going to have fun. I think Gronk is still going to be effective. I think they're going to be, right there in the playoff mix this year in the NFC South.
And they have great wide receivers. I mean, so they're going to score plenty of points. We know that. We're talking with Brian Balding. Right now, when you look at what San Francisco wound up doing, when you look at what Saints wound up doing, when you look at the top teams, what Kansas City, what Baltimore did, who's the best team right now?
San Francisco looks pretty good, Mike. I mean, they got a left tackle, that is the best left tackle in football if he's healthy, Trent Williams. Nothing against Joe Staley, but they got better there. Just think about it. DeForest Buckner is a great player. He's a Pro Bowl player that they traded away to Indianapolis, but they couldn't pay DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead. D Ford. So they go and they get Javon Kinlaw, who, if they light a fire under him, he's the best defensive player in this draft. So you look at that, and then you look at what they did at receiver in Ayuk, who is another guy that can run a route that will fit in perfectly with Kyle Shanahan's system. I think San Francisco reloaded, and I think they're the best right now. Baltimore, though, I mean, they had a great draft, so they'll be right back where they were. I don't know if they're going to be 14-2, but I also expect them to win a playoff game this year.
What I like about, everyone always talks about going back, a generation, how good the Ravens are and how good that franchise is in drafting, and they're right. There's a perfect example, okay? I thought he was a first-round running back. He's dropping now. Running backs, first of all, don't go in the first round anyway. Andy takes a guy he wants for a special need at the end of the first round. That's fine. Now you got a couple of running backs, okay? The kid from Georgia goes, and now he's dropping. Dobbins is dropping. And teams, instead of adjusting, they just let him drop until Baltimore says, hey, I don't need a running back, but I'm not letting this guy pass 55. I'm not letting him go. That's how you get better. Getting a guy like that who is a legitimate top 20 player, top 25 player, and they get him in 55th pick in the draft. That's how you keep getting good players.
You're exactly right, Mike. You're exactly right. I mean, they just let the draft come to them. And if they get to a number, or they get to a pick, and they don't like somebody at that value right there, they trade back. And they get more picks, and they stack themselves for the following year. But, I mean, whether it's, look, Queen was he was a first-round pick. I mean, they don't make mistakes when they draft in the first round, whether it's, Ray Lewis or C.J. Mosley or now, Queen. I mean, he's got all the tools you need to be a first-round pick at middle linebacker. They get Justin Madubuike, who was probably the third or fourth best defensive tackle in this draft. They get better inside. They filled holes in free agency. But yes, I mean, they don't need Dobbins. They've got 3 running backs on that team, on a running team. The quarterback ran for 1,200. But he's going to play, and he may play real soon and play a big part because he is a dynamic. He's out of LaGrange, Texas, Mike. Like, he goes to Columbus, and he literally – nobody could touch the ball when that guy was there. I mean, he did everything for him.
He was great. He played great in big games too. He was. I loved him. I thought he was a tremendous player. And listen, I understand running backs. It's hard for them to go in the first round. It is. It's a quarterback wide receiver league, and you got to get all your defensive guys and your tackles out of the way first. I understand that. And this was a very deep draft in wide receivers, and in tackles, there's no question. But he was a steal where he got drafted. Absolute steal.
He was my number one running back. He was my number one.
Yeah, I
running
liked
back.
him too. And listen, the Georgia kid's good. I like him, and Georgia
Yep.
backs are always very good. I can't
Yep.
believe what LSU did. They have 14 guys. I don't care. Listen, we know LSU had a great year, but to have 14 guys drafted on 7 rounds is almost mind-boggling. I mean, that is in 7 rounds of draft to have 14 guys taken in one draft. That is unbelievable.
4 offensive linemen, Mike.
That is incredible. I mean, you got guys who aren't full-time starters getting drafted. That's unbelievable.
Well, it's the type of talent they get there at LSU. I mean, I've always said, like, if I'm recruiting, and I'm looking to build a team, like, I'm going to LSU first. I'm going to LSU first every year because, like, a guy like I'm at Lane Johnson's house in the Eagles. I mean, he was using his weight room here, and we were talking about Daniil Hunter, who's a Pro Bowl defensive end for the Vikings, who went to LSU. Mike, he didn't start at LSU. He's a Pro Bowl defensive end for the Vikings. I mean, guys that don't start at LSU.
Yeah, it's amazing. You got guys who missed years. You got guys who have behavior problems, guys who had problems with all different things, and they get drafted. So it shows you how much. Listen, Alabama's always got players, and they now out Alabama. They got better players than Alabama has, which is hard to do. I mean, it really is. 14 guys. I mean, I mean, I go back to the old days when you go back when USC used to have all those players, and
Yep.
But 14 is unbelievable. I mean, that is
Mike,
that's insane.
You go to these towns off the bayou and some of these recessed areas because of Katrina, and you just go to Destrin High School where Justin Jefferson was from, Ed Reed was from, and they love football. They know football is they know it's their ticket, man. They love the game, and it shows. They love to practice. They love to compete. Go out there and Jamal Adams, I don't care. Just go watch these guys practice, watch them play. They love the game, Mike.
What guy, we're talking with Brian Bowling, was there a guy in the first round or a guy in the first 15 picks that you thought was not a great pick?
Yeah, I thought the Raiders, and I loved Henry Ruggs. I had no problem with that, but I thought the corner was a reach there. I thought it wasn't a great draft for corners, so I thought teams were reaching. And so it's just, your particular cut. But I like a guy that has ball skills and doesn't commit a lot of penalties.
Which wide receiver did you like the best?
I like Ruggs the best. I thought CeeDee Lamb was as polished as anybody that's come out of this draft in a long time, but I thought Ruggs had tremendous upside. I thought you put the ball in his hands in all the ways that they do now with the bubble screens and, the sweeps and all the stuff that you do right now. Like that guy, you don't need a stopwatch to watch that guy run. You know he's the fastest guy in the field. And
will we be talking about Chase Young next year, or will he be, wow, whatever happened to Chase Young next year?
I've said this. I think that, when I compare him to Nick Bosa, I thought Bosa had more moves. I thought he was stronger. But I do like Chase Young's takeoff, and I do like his athletic ability. Some of these guys, Mike, you get them on the practice field, and you just go, what did he just do? Like, it raises the level. That's what Bosa did in San Francisco. It just raised everybody's performance around him. Because his talent level, you see it every day in practice. It's like that in the NBA. We're watching Jordan's show right now. He goes out there. He just makes everybody better. And I think Chase has that chance. They've been stockpiling number 1 picks on the defensive line for 5 straight years in a row now. You may actually see Jonathan Allen and, some of these guys actually become really good players like Eric Armstead did this year in San Francisco.
I always like to look at it this way. I always ask this question when I talk to the NFL guys. I say, who's the best I'll say, all right, who's the best in 5 years? Who's the best defensive player out of this draft? Who is it? Do you think it's Young or it's somebody else?
I think Javon Kinlaw could be the best.
Okay. And who's the best offensive lineman out of this draft in 5 years? I
think Mekhi Becton will be the best.
And who's the best quarterback out of this draft in 5 years?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say anything negative about Joe Burrow and what he did this year.
You think he's legit, or did he just have a world of talent around him and have the right coordinator and everything fell into place, or is he legit?
So here's what happened between 2018 and 19, Mike. They even go back to Ohio State. One thing, Joe Brady, who came from New Orleans and was, seeing Drew Brees and Sean Payton's system, is he recognized that this guy had the ability to make reads faster than anybody had seen, like a Ginsu knife, like through a meat grinder. And so he said, let's just get 5 receivers out. Let's get 5 receivers out every play. Let him make the decision. And, oh, by the way, if you think that you're going to blitz us, he's going to carve you up. If you want to play coverage, he can pull the ball down and run. So, like, he was indefensible last year. And, yes, the talent around him was supreme. He had protection. But his ability to read defenses and get the ball out accurately in the tight spots was unmatched. Talking to Sam Darnold about him because they're working out together in California, he doesn't have an elite arm. That's how you would knock him. But if you have great anticipation and premier accuracy, you can make up for that.
He had, to be fair, he had the best year I ever saw a college player have. I mean, no one's ever had a better year, counting regular season and postseason. The guy was unbelievable, and his postseason games were unbelievable.
But think about it, Mike. 60 touchdown passes in 15 games. That's 4 games. I mean, if you have 2 in one game, you got to have 6 the next game just to maintain the average. Like, and you're playing, and you look at the teams that LSU beat.
They beat 8 ranked teams. They beat 8 ranked teams.
Yeah. No. Nobody beats 8 ranked teams to win a national championship. They may win 3 or 4, maybe 5, but not 8.
No, he played great. He played great last year. Hard to knock him out. He's got a little edge to him too. He's got a little cockiness to him too, which you don't mind seeing in a quarterback.
There was his composite. You could say, okay, Andrew Luck. I mean, pick Cam Newton. Pick a guy that was number 1. I think he grades out better than all of them.
Wow. So you think he's going to be a good player?
I do. I do, and I think, you just have to take some – I was just watching Nick Saban do a show yesterday breaking down the national championship, and he was breaking down all these concepts that LSU was having and why Clemson was having all these problems. And you go, this would be crazy for Cincinnati not to literally install this playbook. It's an NFL playbook with protections. You got A.J. Green. You just drafted T. Higgins. You got a great running back. Like, put this playbook in for this kid. Let him go because it's an NFL playbook.
So what team did you like? What team did you come out of the draft and say, I really like what this team did?
Well, I mean, the Ravens were off the charts good, Mike. The Minnesota Vikings, like, you want to trade away Stephon Diggs, but you go get Justin Jefferson. I mean, they couldn't believe the Eagles passed on Jefferson. And then you go get yourself a bunch of quarterbacks. They got 15 players. I think they got themselves a right tackle, a left tackle. I mean, they did outstanding. I think San Francisco did well. I thought there was a lot of teams that really helped themselves out.
Well, listen, thanks. I appreciate the time. We'll talk soon. Thanks very much, Brian.
All right, my pleasure, Mike.
Thank you.
Buddy.
Brian Baldinger, back after this. 5 weeks ago. We did this 5 weeks ago, and we had the same CVS guy up there 5 weeks ago who said by next Monday there'll be testing centers in every place in the country, at every CVS. None of that has been true. It's 5 weeks later. He's back at the White House today telling you that next Monday there's going to be something else. That's what's wrong with this stuff. Every 5 weeks, something else is going to happen. We're still waiting, okay? This has been just a disaster. That's all there is to it. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. We have just done and listen, this has not been an easy problem. I completely agree with that. But let's be honest. We are nowhere on testing. If we think we're going to wait till everybody gets a test till we go back to work, no one's ever going back to work. I mean, we've tested less than 2% of the people in the United States. This country is massive. It's 330 million people. How many people you think, how long is it going to take you to do that? Plus, if you listen to the guys, they'll tell you that the reactant that they need for the test is not available. Nobody can get a test. LabCorp the other day, and LabCorp's stock rocketed today, so I hope somebody made money on it. But the bottom line is you call LabCorp, you can't get a test. You cannot get one. Now, my doctor contacted me today and said, listen, I'm going to be able to get you a blood test if you want a test for antibodies next week. We should have it, and then it should be back the week after that. So that's now 2 more weeks. You can get the test next week, and then you can write your prescription, you can go to the lab, you can get the antibody test, and the week after that, it'll come back. That's 2 more weeks to get it. I just got that today from my doctor, that we can go do that. Next week, he'll write us a prescription, we can go get the antibody test, and then a week later, it'll come back. So that's 2 more weeks. Now, I don't know if everybody's going to be in the same boat as that, okay? But that's 2 more weeks. The problem is this needed to all get done 5-6 weeks ago. It was promised 5-6 weeks ago. And now here we are, and it's why we're in the same place. There's no plan. I watched the governors today. They do not give you one word about how they're going to open New York City. You see Cuomo on there? Fine. I think Andrew's heart's in the right place. He's done a good job. I think both governors. I think Murphy's done a good job. Murphy gives you this 6-point thing. We're going to do this. 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 Okay? Fine. First of all, they're not anywhere near to the point where people aren't still showing up at the hospital and people aren't still dying. Because in both states, they're still showing up at the hospital every day and they're still dying. That's still going on. I talked to somebody today who was working still at the hospital. They said, we're still sending people out the back door. Still. So that's not over with. And the number last night was still 366 people or something in the state, so it's not like it's a few. And then tell me, have somebody explain to me how you get the people back into New York City when you have the scarf lady, okay, tell you that social distancing. See, Pence comes on, he goes on Geraldo's show and says, by Memorial Day, this will all be behind us. Does he know when Memorial Day is? And then after he says that, the next day the scarf lady goes on TV and says, social distancing will be with us until Christmas. So there's the vice president saying that by Memorial Day, because Geraldo asked him, can I put my boat in the water? Can I be out of my boat? And he said, by Memorial Day, this will all be behind us, which is completely impossible. And then the scarf lady gets on yesterday when she's asked about Pence's comment, and she says, social distancing will be with us until Christmas. Now, if you're going to have social distancing, how do you get the people who have to go to work in New York into New York? Can somebody tell me how that's done? It's not on a train. It's not on a bus. It's not in a car. It's not on a subway. So how do you do it? They're going to walk in 6 feet apart in a procession line? How are they going to do that? There's no such thing. They even admit they can't even social distance in New York City because when people come out, the streets get so crowded that they can't even have social distancing on the street. No less bring people out of their homes. Have you ever gone anywhere? I mean, all of you out there listening have either gotten in your car at 6 o'clock in the morning and gone to the city, or have gotten into public transportation at 6 o'clock in the morning and gone to the city and realized you are in a mass of humanity. How are those people going to social distance? They're not. So every one of those people is going to, if anyone has it, everyone's getting it, and then they're bringing it home. So get ready for everybody having it if you're going to reopen New York City. Otherwise, I mean, Andrew can get up there and reopen Putnam County or open Ulster or open Dutchess County. You can do that tomorrow. Can't open New York City. And until you can open New York City, I don't know how you have an economy. So when there's a plan, let me know. So you can parade these guys out here today. And some lady was on there right now. I don't know. I'm watching as they're parading people up there. And we all know it was a tough weekend for the president with all that craziness. Listen, I don't know what he was thinking last week. Nor does anybody else. You give him a mulligan and you move on. I mean, what are you going to do? Okay? He had a tough moment. He's thinking out loud, and when you're president of the United States and you're in front of a microphone, it's not a smart time to do that. That's all there is to it. But we haven't got a plan that works. And we all know it because none of us can get tests. And then they tell you about this tracing, which to me is the most ridiculous thing. So let me get this straight. You're going to give me a test, and then I'm going to test positive, and then you're going to sit me down and you're going to ask me everybody I've come in contact with in X amount of days and weeks, and then you're going to find and locate each one of those people? How many people is it going to take to do that? And who's hiring them? Are we going to have a stimulus program for them? Or are they part of the PPP program? Because how are those people getting paid who are going to do that? I mean, One guy talked about hiring 56,000 people for tracing. Are we serious? 56,000 people? I mean, it becomes more comical by the day. Let's be honest. Here's what we should do. Let's put up, and if the government doesn't have it, because they probably, well, I guess they can keep printing money. I mean, they've been printing it like it's going out of style. So put up $20 billion to the country, to the company that comes up with the first therapeutic that works. Put up $20 billion in the world to the first third. Now it's got to work. There's no shortcuts here. Okay, it's got to work, and it's got to be done right, and it's got to be done through protocol. You got to be able to trust it. You can't have any shortcuts here and say I got the right stuff. It's got to be real. It can't be something that's going to kill people. So it's got to be real. You know that. You know, one guy said that if you want to be realistic, they asked him, "How about a vaccine?" He said, "Okay, I'm going to be realistic with you in a vaccine." He said, the fastest I've ever heard a vaccine approved is 15 months, the fastest. And he said, if you were going to then have a vaccine that everything was fast-tracked and it worked, and you're ready to mass produce it, it would then take you another year and a half to produce enough tablets to give one to everybody. So that's 3 years. Good luck. When we come back, we'll hit the fan.
Mike's on. He's ready to go. On the fan. New York Sports Radio. Mike's on. Mike's on. He'll get you the sports any way that he can. It's Mike Francesa on the fan. Sports Radio 66 and 101.9 FM. WFAN.
All right, we hit the fan on this Monday evening, the 27th day of the month of April. Where did April go? Well, we all know where it went. Hopefully May's a little bit better. We'll just keep our fingers crossed. I just heard that Susan and John have Joe Girardi at 6:30, so you can look forward to that as they bring another Yankee game this evening. That coming up later on the fan right after we finish. A couple of things here. Number one, I saw the one part of the Jordan thing last night. I didn't see the other part because I watched Homeland. It was the last Homeland, and I've always been a Homeland person. Now, Homeland wasn't great this year. Matter of fact, it hasn't been great the last couple of years because as what happens with those classic shows, and Homeland's in the prime was not only one of the great shows of all time, Carrie Matheson's one of the great characters in the history of American television. She was that good. I mean, she was that brilliant. But the show, obviously, which had some great characters through the years, whether you're talking about Brody or Quinn. And, you know, Sal was always a great character. But even the last episode disappointed me a little bit. But, hey, it wasn't great last year. The ending was what it was. You know, they got through it without killing Sal or her off, which is what you were going to have to do. You had to give up something, so you gave up Carrie being recognized as a spy, even though if you know Carrie, you know that in her heart of hearts, she could never be a spy. She could never be flipped. She was that patriotic. So if you knew anything about her, through all her craziness, through all the things that were part of her bipolar existence, you knew that she could never, ever do anything against her country. So the fact that she sent Saul the message in the book, a book about her having, you know, become a, you know, Russian sympathizer, which wasn't true, and she figured out a way to keep Saul alive, which is what she wanted to do at the end, was okay. Now, Billion start this week, so I'm on the Billions. I did see the saga of the Bulls finally beating the Pistons, and I lived that. And going from the Pippen migraine to the way the Bulls used to beat up all of them, but especially beat up Grant and Pippen and intimidate them, which they did until they couldn't intimidate them anymore. And Sally said it perfectly. Okay? He said it perfectly. When they knocked Pippen down on that basket, and he got off to a fast start in that game. When they knocked him down and drove him into the stands. And he got right back up and just went to the line, made the free throw, came down and dunked. He was like, well, that's it. We're done. And that was the end. They were never going to beat them again. It was over for them, and the Bulls were on their way. And that was that sweet. And listen, there was no love between Jordan and Isaiah, and it wasn't just because of that. It had to do with the whole NBA pecking order. It had to do with it had to do once with a thing at the All-Star game where Isaiah, being Isaiah, belittled Jordan, that Jordan never forgot it. Jordan's never loved Isaiah. We know that, okay? So you weren't going to have Jordan ever give those Pistons any slack for the way they walked off the court. And listen, the Celtics didn't go off the court right when the Pistons beat them. They didn't. And the Bulls didn't go off – the Pistons didn't go off the court right when the Bulls beat them, but who cares? You know what? Beating them's the thing. So they didn't shake their hands. So you showed more class than they did. Great, that's it. They didn't. Call them whatever word you want to call them and move on. And he did, and that's the way it is. But they finally got past the bullies, and that was really the awakening of the dynasty. That's where the dynasty started. That is where it started. And I always liked the Rodman years better, and I'll tell you why. I know the other story was about Rodman. I didn't see it. I didn't see the Rodman episode. But I'll give you I loved watching Rodman play. And I used to go, anytime they played in New York, I went. Dog and I used to always have the same seats. We'd always sit on the baseline, right near the Bulls bench, about 3 seats underneath the basket, to the left of the bench, underneath the basket, on that end of the court. That's where Dog and I would always sit and watch the games. That was our seat. And I never missed a ball game, ever. And Dog and I used to go do the playoff games a lot. And if the Knicks were there, we'd go to all those games. And so we loved seeing the Bulls. And I liked the Bulls better than the Dog did, but I loved watching that team play defense. And Rodman, if you like basketball, is a fascinating study. I mean, I could live without all the nonsense that he tried to do to promote himself off the court. That went in one ear and out the other. I could care less who he was dating, marrying, dressing like, whatever. I could care less, okay? I don't care what he took from the Madonna playbook. I could care less. But I'll tell you this. Here's the thing that you took from those teams. You knew what Jordan brought to the game. You knew the exquisite skills that Pippen brought to the game. But what was underrated was twofold about those teams. Number one, how good they were on defense and how freakishly athletic Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman were. Here were 3 guys who, among the 3 of them, probably had a collective body fat of about 15%, counting the 3 of them together. They were in phenomenal shape. They never tired. They played exhaustively on defense. And Rodman, believe it or not, was probably the one, freakishly, who tired the least. Rodman was a freak of nature. He would go up and down that court. He would play great defense. He would go after every rebound. Now, was there times he lost concentration? Yeah, absolutely. He was Rodman. There was some goofy games sometimes. But my point is, he was and then you'd see him after the game and he'd be on a bike. After playing crazy minutes, getting huge numbers on the backboards, playing suffocating defense, and he'd be on a bike after the game. This guy never tired. None of them did. Jordan, Pippen, Rodman were freaks physically. They were tireless performers. And these guys all logged major minutes. And remember, Jordan's role was to carry the load on offense. Pippen's role was to be the point forward, carry the load on offense, finish with the dunk, shoot an occasional 3 where he blew hot and cold, which you know, and play great defense. But he could do all that because he ran the floor incredibly and he handled incredibly well. There's nothing he couldn't do. He's a great passer. He could handle unbelievably, and he was the best perimeter defender I think I ever saw. I've always said that other than Bill Russell, I think he's the best all-around defender in the history of the league. for what he could do to a team and to a game. He could take teams away defensively with what he did. Rodman was also the most annoying figure because he was tireless in how much he would go to work on driving somebody mad. And that was fascinating. I used to love to watch those guys. Love to watch them. And they were, I mean, listen, was Rodman goofy? Yeah, it was really goofy. But what he could do in the area of rebounding and defense was just incredibly, and he was such a smart player. Some players just have a sixth sense. He had it. He had an instinct about the game that you don't teach. First of all, how would you teach him anyway? I don't think his attention span could be taught. This was all stuff he knew. You didn't teach him to do the things he did on the basketball floor. He did them instinctively. And that made him the rarest of players. And there was a guy who could be incredibly important to a team performance and score 2 points. And maybe not attempt a shot. Maybe go back up with a layup and maybe got to go back up with an offensive rebound and get fouled. I mean, other than that, maybe not attempt a shot. They don't run a play for him, ever. I mean, just one of the more unusual. I mean, they were all, first of all, there's Jordan's brilliance. There's Pippen's versatility and explosiveness. And then there's what Rodman brought. It was fascinating to watch. It really was. And they all were that, between, Jordan's like 6'5", Pippen's like 6'7"-ish, and Rodman's a little bigger than that. And I mean, whatever he was, maybe 6'8" and a half. I don't know what Rodman was exactly, 6'8" and a half, 6'9", whatever he was. But the thing was, they were just in great shape, and the versatility that they brought and what they could do defensively was unbelievable. It really was, and that's what made them great. And they filled the gaps perfectly because what Jordan was going to do was he was going to pressure the other team defensively all night. Make you take the ball out of his hands. Beat you off the dribble. When you relaxed, he would beat you immediately with a fast basket. If you relaxed for 1 second, he would score off whoever you relaxed with. You had to get the ball out of his hands. When you did, he'd often come back and get it anyway and score. And then what he didn't do, Pippen excelled at, and what Pippen needed help at, Rodman excelled at. And that made them with a bunch of role players, a very unique team. That's why I like those three teams better than the other teams. Back after with the Yankee stuff, sounds like Joe Girardi will be there too, so listen to that. Listen to some baseball stuff. Now, baseball, hey, you're hearing little reverberations. They can't have a plan yet because until the government has a plan, baseball sure can't have a plan. You're hearing a bunch of different things. You're hearing July 1st. There's a date. Who knows? We'll wait and see. And the one thing I would caution and give some of the baseball guys or baseball writers who have opined on the subject, and they're right, baseball's got to be very careful. In this day and age, with what we're living through in this country, and with the amount of people going through the hardships they're going through, and with the amount of people unemployed right now, and with the country going through the crisis it's going through, nobody is going to have any tolerance for greedy billionaire owners and greedy millionaire players fighting over every last dollar in baseball. And the baseball players took an agreement. They're splitting up, I think, $170 million for April and May. They think they've already got a deal to be paid in full the rest of the year. The owners say, no, we still have to negotiate if there's not going to be players and fans in the stands. No. If they get into this in a huff, if they get any of their union people or any of the big mouth agents who make the wrong statement, they will live to regret they made that statement. Because if you think America is going to have any tolerance for baseball players or owners having one iota of empathy for any player who right now has to get by on $4,775 a day until May 31st, get by, as a couple of them have called it, get by on $4,775 a day. All right, or an owner saying, hey, I'm not going to lose money unless I get every dollar from the ticket money, which is, about $4 billion of their revenue. And the players saying, no, you have to pay us in full even if we don't have any fans in the stands, which is ridiculous. Okay, the owners will get the sympathy from the public because the players' stand is outrageous. But no one wants to hear from either side. No one wants to hear from rich owners or wealthy players in this day and age about what's going on. Okay, so do not get into that squabble publicly because it will come down on both your houses. You're better off going away for the rest of the summer than to get into that fight publicly. And it sounds like they're heading for that fight. They have to be smarter than to get in that fight. That's a fight they cannot have right now because it's a fight that neither side can win. Now, do I think the players would come off looking more greedy? Because the premise is that it's already been agreed upon and the players get paid. But you cannot expect the owners to make up the money if there's no fans in the stands. That is still the biggest part of baseball's revenue is the receipts and the revenues they get from game receipts, local TV and radio, and, of course, beer and parking, etc. That's still the bulk. That's not the bulk in the NFL. That is the bulk. The national TV money does not make you whole in baseball. It does in football. So football could have a scenario where they could get by without having fans in the stands. They don't want to, but they could. Baseball can't. Baseball could only on a discount. They couldn't and pay everybody because there are teams that have models where they would lose, actually lose a couple $100,000 every 2 weeks based on that kind of premise with no fans in the stands. Now, one other thing I've been asked about a lot, and I got some information on last night, and I'll give you what I have already. I've been asked about Saratoga. All I know so far is this. There's no sales at Saratoga this year. And the biggest reason why is many of the buyers come from Japan, they come from the Middle East, they come from Ireland. They can't get to America right now. So with that being the case, they won't have those sales, which are international. There's an international clientele for those sales for those yearlings. That's not happening. So the yearling sales are not happening in Saratoga. Now, that takes a lot of steam out of Saratoga, number one. Number two, the jockey colony we've been told as owners to start to put our horses into training. So that's begun. Lee Einslider, who runs our stable and handles the day-to-day, of which we have 7 horses between us. Rick Pitino owns a couple of them, 2 with us. We've put our horses into training. Now, thinking about Saratoga. Now, ours are with Bill Mott. The plan right now is that there will be racing in Saratoga. You figured there would be for this reason. Saratoga racing is the jewel of thoroughbred racing. The simulcast wagering across the country and around the world, but especially across the country on Saratoga races every day is enormous. People want to bet Saratoga. They bet Saratoga in every racetrack in the country. They sit there and bet the product at Saratoga because it's so good. So everybody bets Saratoga racing. So Saratoga racing would do a big number and would be worth everybody's while, even if there were no fans in the stands. Now, having Saratoga with no fans is like having Yankee games with no fans. It just doesn't work. I mean, there's no ambiance. It doesn't seem like the same sport. I understand that. But they have an economic reason, just like the NFL will have, an economic reason to have the event because of how successful the product is in simulcasting. Every track has wagering from Saratoga offered at their track. So if you go to any track in the country, you can wager that day at the window on Saratoga as well as wager at the track in front of you. So that's done at every track in America, and a lot of tracks around the world. So that makes it a very attractive from that standpoint. So all we know right now is we are being told there will be racing. We don't know if there will be any fans in the stands. That we don't know yet. And if Belmont doesn't open, if Belmont doesn't open, and I don't know about Belmont yet, of whether it's going to open for the spring summer meet or not. I don't know that. If it doesn't, I would think they would open Saratoga earlier and just set Saratoga up as a TV studio and maybe have it run from the 4th of July to Labor Day and run the races there as a TV studio. You know, basically it'll be the world's most beautiful TV studio. And that could be how it goes this summer. I don't know. That I don't know. But I do think there will be racing there. So if you're an owner, I think you can plan on racing there. If you're someone who likes to wager on the races, I think you will be able to do that. As far as going to Saratoga, that I can't offer you yet as a possibility. I don't know. That one still remains, like so many things that we're looking at these days, like baseball and everything else, very much up in the air day to day. Until we have a plan until we can turn on the TV and see the governors at noon and the president at 6 and see some kind of plan that makes some sense, talking about sports having a plan is rather moot, because the country's got to have a plan first, and it doesn't look like they have one yet. When they have one, then we can see these leagues and all the different sports start to have one. So until we start to see something that's concrete that we can all look at and follow, when that starts, then we'll be on the road back. We'll keep our fingers crossed and keep hoping and praying that when we wake up tomorrow, something will have changed. That's all you can do, is just hope tomorrow is going to be a better day. That's all you can do, and that's what we do right now, is get through today and hope that tomorrow's a little better. And hope that the things we love to watch and do and see are going to happen in the very near future. So that's what we do. Just put an optimistic spin on it and hope for the best. Casamigos Tequila, as always, brings you the program, brought to you by those who drink it. Baseball coming up next. We'll see you tomorrow.